So we know that for large agile frameworks, there's actually DA flags, there's Scrum Scale framework, there's also leading safe framework. So we really want you to hear from the experts like our special guest today, which I'll allow Ethan to actually introduce him later on. And hopefully throughout this 4 days event of Move Forward Asia Summit, we are able to actually connect you guys with all these experts who have very successful experience in running agile implementation or transformation worldwide, so that you guys can actually go back to your organizations and help your businesses and organizations to achieve business agility. So long story short, without further ado, I would like to pass it on to Ethan to introduce our very special guest.
So what makes Scrum Inc. So special is that the knowledge is from Dr. Jeff Sutherland himself. That's the original knowledge. Scrum Inc. is very much focused on delivering results. So we are looking at the agile industry nowadays when we are seeing more and more people just take certificates after certificates after certificates. So you have 10, 20 certificates, right? So to Scrum Inc., that's not the way to go. What we really want the next generation agile practitioner, agile trainer, agile coaches to be is to be able to go into an organization and create instant impact. We want you to deliver result and business outcome, more revenue, less cost, hybrid productive team, things like that. So to Scrum Inc., right, it's not good enough just to use the process, just to do a daily stand-up meeting and things like that. That to us, that's not good enough. To Scrum Inc., all of us, right, we would love to go into organizations, be able to deliver result and impact. We are always measured by the result and impact that we created. So that's what's unique about the Scrum Inc. knowledge and Scrum Inc. itself. The story got started when Dr. Sutherland in 1983 joined a company called Midland Continentals, right? So he solved business problem for them, and he took over a money-losing business unit, and he's able to, in 6 months' time, turn around it, so that is making money. Initially, before he came in, it's like losing money. The cost exceeds the revenue by 30%. So when he's done with that, after 6 months, the revenue exceeds cost by 30%. So it's a 60% turnaround. And the solution he created there evolved to become Scrum at Scale to solve the organizational problem, and Scrum to solve the team level problem. And that's how all the Scrum knowledge gets started, right? He created Scrum Inc. because he's worried that people are not getting the message like that anymore. Is that there are a lot of people focusing on just installing the Scrum process into other people's company and then say, hey, you're Agile, you're Scrum, you're done. Well, you're not done until you deliver result, business outcome, right? So today we have Jeff coming here. Today we are very honored at CI Agile. We are at CI Agile, we are always looking for the best trainers, the best mind to give you the knowledge. And we most usually do it for free. The goal is to let you to be able to see all the different houses of knowledge, pick and use the one that makes the most sense for you. Without further ado, I'll let Jeff take over. Jeff, you want to start by introducing yourself and then go ahead.
Absolutely. Right? Great. And thank you for that introduction to Scrum and Scrum Inc. and what we're doing with Agile education globally. I'm really grateful to see so many people from all around Asia here today. Actually, from if you go east to west, I think we've got pretty much all of Asia represented here today. And I'm really grateful for that. I know for some of you, it's kind of late in the night, and so I'm doubly grateful for you to stay up and listen to me. My name is Jeff Stuit. I have been doing this kind of work for 14 years. I started out my journey as an Agilist, as a business analyst on a team that was, I was living in the Seattle, Washington area in the USA at the time. And I was a business analyst for a team that was working for a customer in the gaming industry. But then I went off and began working as a Scrum Master about a year or so after that. Eventually worked as a product owner for a while before in 2011, I went off on my own and worked as a coach and consultant, first traveling all over all over the United States. And eventually by 2014, I started traveling all over the world. And that has been my particular specialty, is working with organizations that are working with global teams building global products. So working with companies that are trying to adopt Scrum on a worldwide scale. So I'm really grateful to have you all, see you all here coming from different places, because this is really a global phenomenon. And I'm glad that we're all here learning together. I'm talking to you from the state of Michigan this morning. It's in the upper Midwest. Ethan has spent time in the state of Michigan while he was a student here at the University of Michigan. It's in the upper Midwest. It's this state, if you look at a map of the United States, it's the state that's surrounded by the Great Lakes. And so all people from the state of Michigan have a portable map of Michigan that they can tell you where you're from. So I am from right here. That's where Cascade, Michigan is. Ethan can show you all the places he's been to. But I generally, up until the times in the pandemic in the last year, I traveled globally. In fact, I was actually locked down in India for 4.5 months last year. And I really like practicing in Asia, because I think Asia in particularly is the great fertile ground for Agile on Earth. It's the part of the world that's really really ascending. And I've been really grateful for the time I've been able to practice there as a coach. Now, I came into this work really not so much as a trainer, but as a coach. Generally companies invite me to come live with them for a few months. And I work, once people have gotten their initial training, they work with them, with their Scrum Masters, product owners, and the teams all throughout the organization for a while, to say that they're really practicing Scrum well and doing it well and achieving their business goals. And that's where I want to start today. The theme of our talk tonight is business agility, using Scrum at scale. But before we talk Scrum at scale, before we even talk about Scrum, I want to focus on the first part, which is actually, even before we talk about agility, I want to talk about business. And so what I really want to stress is that before you actually start off on this journey, for whether you're adopting Scrum or some other a lean practice or some other form of Agile, the most important thing to start off with this is to have a compelling business goal to start with, right? And the business goal should be really simple. I'm going to share with you a few business goals that I've heard from leaders at an organization, and think about these when you hear them, because as you're starting off in your own Agile journey, you should really try to adopt one of these. It's something like this. So think about your own business as you're doing it and what you're aspiring for. So my most recent client was an insurance company based in the United States, and they had a number of teams in India, actually a large number of teams in India. I was over there working with them for a while, but they were an insurance company, and they had to do, of course, as insurance companies do, a lot of claims processing and a lot of customer service work associated with those claims. So at the time, they didn't have any mobile apps or anything that made it easy for people to get information about claims of their account. And so they had a big call center to do this. They wanted to introduce technology so customers could start serving themselves. And so they had a very simple business goal. We want to reduce our call center costs 40% within 1 year. There's a good, solid, measurable business objective that they use when they were wanting to adopt Scrum at scale. That's one of the major business goals, is that 40% reduction in costs. I was at another company. This was in the transportation manufacturing industry. They were a major supplier for transportation equipment for large transport, for like buses and trucks. and they got a new CEO, and they had a new CEO, and he had a very simple, very simple objective. I want to triple the revenue of this company within 3 years. Okay, very simple thing like that. I was working with another company in India, right? You know, they were in the broadcast industry, selling software for set-top boxes for broadcast and satellite, and they had a the vice president in charge of this 3,000 person business unit had a very simple goal. We need to shift our customers from wanting to fire us to spending more money on us, right? So they had real quality problems, very long cycle delivery times. So they had it says simple objectives. Today, our customers want to fire us. A year from now, I want them spending more money on us. Another one was, I was with another company, in an American transportation company, horrible employee turnover. We want to reduce employee turnover, which was close to 50% at that time, to more of a typical what you see an employee turnover rate in a company. They wanted to go from 50% turnover to 15%. Or a simple thing you hear Jeff Sutherland say a lot, that if you're a publicly traded company that's going to take on Scrum, you really shouldn't take it on unless you plan on doubling your stock price. All right. So there are very simple business objectives there, measurable things. And one of the things I was asked to talk about is, how do you measure success? Set up those measures when you start. Before you think about Scrum, think of your business, right? And why would you take on this journey? What is the specific business result? And that's what you need to measure on. All right. Now with that, in the beginning, I'm going to start sharing my slides here. Now that we've had that conversation right here in the beginning, hopefully we can all see that. And that is, and oh, by the way, I should mention, I am going to watch the Q&A and the chat window. And so if you have questions that come up, please type them in the Q&A in the chat window. I got one question wanting to compare Scrum at Scale at less. Let's hold that one to the later. So let's learn about the basics of Scrum and Scrum at Scale before we get into comparing frameworks. So I wanted you to take a look at this here. All right, this is just very. There's a very simple, and I intentionally made it black and white, view of the Scrum framework. And a lot of you might be new to Scrum, and that's the most basic as you can get. You start with something called a product backlog, which is all the ideas that could possibly end up in a product. You focus on the things that are most valuable, most important, and pull those into a sprint backlog. And after generally about 2 weeks of work, some teams do it in one, some teams do it a little more, but afterwards you actually result in a shippable product, something that we can ship out to have customers use and get immediate feedback. Now, this is a very simple representation. This is about as simple representation of Scrum as you can get, but it is tremendously difficult for most organizations who start off with this to do this, because most organizations we have, even in the year 2021, are still organized based on good old 20th century Western industrial organization that treats people as parts of a machine that are just gonna churn out products that are easy to sell. And we know from our last 20 to 30 years in the software realm, and now its extension into any kind of knowledge work, that's not how things get built, that it's intensely people oriented. But so this simple little thing is, before you can think about doing Scrum across an organization, you have to master, you have to build up the muscle to be able to do this very simply. Now I'm going to show you. Right, we're going to go on. Now here, of course, Scrum is not just a process, it's made of people. right? And here are the basics of the Scrum network, Scrum framework. 3 roles, 5 events, 3 artifacts. Right? So the roles are really most important because software is made by people. It's not made by machines, right? And so this is the role of the people are the most important part. So if you look there on the left, every Scrum team has to have a collection of developers, people with the knowledge who can actually make something of value. There's a product owner who actually has the knowledge of the market, knowledge of the customer, who actually can set the vision and priority and help the team choose what is the most important thing, most valuable thing to be working on. And then the Scrum Master, so somebody who holds the space for the team and helps get anything out of their way so they can produce. The core events, you see, this is, I'm just going to go through these really quickly, but you can see we start off generally with a sprint planning, right, where we actually plan what we're going to commit to build in the next 2 weeks. We have the daily Scrum where we check in and replan every 24 hours for any adjustments. At the end, we actually show real stuff to real customers at a sprint review. Look at what we did. How did we build things together? What I think is the most important part of the Scrum framework. If you're not doing that, you really shouldn't even be doing it. And that's the retrospective. How are we going to improve what we did? And then using that feedback to refine the backlog continuously. And so the output is actually real working stuff, a product increment, something that hopefully people are actually going to pay to use, or we're going to get our business results. Our business results are realized through a product increment. So if we're going to realize cost reductions, revenue increases, market share increases, or just a happy development team is what to retain employees, the rubber hits the road in a product increment. If you can't produce a product increment, you can't do Scrum well. You have to be producing it every sprint. From that, we get feedback to improve our product backlog, and that again feeds back into what we choose to do every sprint. So this is a cycle. It's called an iteration, but it's like anything else. I am a musician. I play a Turkish instrument. It's an instrument common to the Middle East. It's called an oud. For those of you in Turkey, I've studied a Turkish oud for almost 20 years now. And starting off with this, that's an iterative thing. If I'm learning a new technique or I want to improve how I'm doing, it's an iterative process. And that's the power of the Scrum framework. It's not just producing things like a machine, but it's constantly looking, how can we create better stuff for customers? How can we improve our own quality? How can we produce more within the sprint, within the iteration, without working more? And so this is really an important thing before we start talking about scaling, right? This is critically important for a company to master this just with a team, because if you can't master this with just inside a team, you really can't scale. In fact, you'll probably end up doing more damage to your whole organization if you try to scale and do this across the whole organization before you've mastered it on one team. So there's something I want to leave with you here as we move on with this, is that if we're talking, I know in this series of conversations you're having, we're talking a lot about how to do this at scale. But there's something that's really interesting, is particularly with Scrum, is that the desire to scale, to me, is an admission of failure, right? It means we have to scale because we couldn't help our own teams do as much as they could possibly do. Jeff Sutherland talks about the Scrum framework as being a framework for hyper productivity. That means people working the same amount of hours as they were doing with the same amount of effort can produce 400% more than they were doing before. And if you haven't achieved that with just a few teams, that is really an admission of failure. That means, you know, maybe the organization is still too focused on management instead of focused on the people, thinking the solutions are coming from the managers. It's an organization that is having trouble getting out of its own way. When I talk about impediments a little bit, this is deceptively simple, right? But often, you know, I'll tell a story about an organization that had to go up to the C-suite to get a team's computers so they were updating software correctly so they could actually work, right? So so that was an organization that was really confronting its own failure to help its own teams become that productive, to achieve hyper-productive results. So before you do this, you're taking out the Scrum, think of your business objectives. I want to reduce costs in the sector of my business 40%. What am I willing to commit to help teams do that? It's usually significantly more than leadership talks about, all right? But the good news of that, you know, the desire of Scrum to me is an admission of failure, but Scrum offers a powerful path to learn from failures and exploit it. And we're going to start exploring some of that now. So we looked at the Scrum framework, right? We'll talk about, wow, just at the team level, what does Scrum look like when it's working? First of all, it means you're getting your business goals that you set, the ones we talked about earlier. You have a business goal. You're getting it, but you're getting with ease, right? You're able to actually set higher and higher goals for yourself because your business is to be able to get those goals with ease. That takes time and practice. The intensity of your practice at this will dictate the amount of time it has. I talked about the company, the broadcast software company that went in a year. They went from their customers wanting to fire them to their customers spending sometimes 10 times more money than they were doing before. Eventually, they were able to do that with ease because they actually learned very quickly, and their vice president allowed teams to learn this practice very intensely. So they got good very quickly. So I mentioned Jeff Sutherland calls hyper productivity, which is velocity, which is a concept from Scrum that I won't talk about a lot, but you can see basically a team can produce at 400% greater output than it was before. The organization can clear its own impediments in less than 48 hours. I just made that up. Right, but I've been in organizations that want to take on Scrum and suddenly they've got problems with hiring or purchasing or things like that have been impediments in that organization for years that are holding up their teams. Well, great companies that are really great at doing this can do it in less than 48 hours. And now all of a sudden we have products that can immediately adapt to emerging customer requirements, right? And we're actually making the tough decisions about products that customers aren't using and aren't paying for, we're not going to work on anymore. It's amazing how many companies who are just using companies who are just producing stuff because their own internal process that they produce it and customers aren't using it. That's a lot of money being spent for stuff people aren't using. Okay, so now that we talked about Scrum, remember, we want to build up that muscle and be able to produce that kind of output with just core teams. Then we're going to look at, wow, we really want to extend that to the whole organization so the whole organization has that kind of muscle. And here's a picture of the Scrum framework. Now, we just have a 1-hour conversation tonight, so I'm not going to go through, but the Scrum framework, you'll notice if you look at this, right, it's actually quite similar to Scrum. There's a Scrum Master, but the Scrum Master cycle is actually, the Scrum Master cycle and the team cycle is going to do that. We're going to use the same simple processes, but we're going to extend it to multiple teams. And this is something about doing Scrum at scale in the organization that's really important. We retain that kind of simplicity. And if you have a whole group of team, you have a Scrum team, which is 5 to 9 people, hopefully, we'll talk about a team of teams known as a Scrum of Scrums, which is works together as a team. And the Scrum of Scrums has a product owner, right? And so the one thing I want to do, somebody asked, I got one question. What is the key differences between Scrum at Scale and LESS, which stands for Large Scale Scrum, which is another approach to scaling? Scrum at Scale retains the intense focus on customers and product owners. And it's also for the entire organization. You have other frameworks, Scaled Agile framework, Large Scale Scrum is one, are still very software focused. They're just focused on technology. You'll notice in this picture, half of the picture is devoted to the product owner and the product owner getting better and groups of product owners getting better. That is a key difference. The other key difference I'll show you, we'll talk about in a second, is this executive action team and how the impediment removal and improvement process and how we're producing has to involve the entire organization, not just software people, right? It has to involve HR, purchasing, finance, and all those things to be successful. A bit of theory right here. This is probably really the only theory I'm going to talk about, but it's really important. Jeff Sutherland's background is actually as a medical researcher, right? He didn't start off life as a software guy, a medical researcher, and he based Scrum at Scale really on the biology of the human cell and how entities interact in nature. And this, you see this picture in nature. Nature runs by simple rules, and entities out in nature, whether it's cells or different biological organisms, can have great freedom to interact according to simple rules. And what this chart really means is that if organization can get out of its own way, amazing, beautiful, and valuable results can come out. It's when we introduce a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of rules about how people interact with each other that you see from more traditional project management approaches that things get in the way. So we want to retain that amazing ability. And that's the thing. When we're practicing in Scrum, and particularly Scrum at Scale, there is no set prescription. There's no big picture of this. I might show you some big pictures, but it's going to be different for every organization. Every organization, every context, every market is unique. We don't take a whole big picture and inflict it on an organization. Scrum at Scale particularly lets a company find its own best organization to deliver. Scrum provides some tools and some methods to address where we get in, how to get through where we get in our own way, but an organization has to come up with itself. So if I define Scrum at Scale, it's interesting. You look at the definition of Scrum, so Scrum is a framework by which people can address complex adaptive problems while productively and creatively delivering products of the greatest high level value. Scrum at Scale is a framework in which networks or groups of teams operating consistently with the Scrum Guide can address complex adaptive systems. So it retains that same simple simplicity, right? And the products these days can be anywhere. All right. So here's the interesting question. Fauzi asked, how to start implementation of Scrum at Scale in the standard organization that uses top-down command and control. One of the things we're going to do with Scrum at Scale is we're going to learn how an organization organizes itself to transcend beyond top-down command and control. Top-down command and control in a company that aspires to get the kind of business results is going to have to give up that organization. This is why Scrum and Scrum at Scale are difficult. It requires people and an organization to put the past in the past. Top-down command and control organization does not work. when you're working with intelligent people who are creating amazing products with their knowledge. It's just, right? And so organization. And so one of the things with Scrum at Scale is it exposes right away how top-down organization is helping in getting their own way. It helps expose where an organization is getting in its own way. We're not going to blow up the top-down organization, but what we're going to do is expose where it's getting in its own way. All right. Let's keep forging ahead here. All right, what's going on here? There we go. So I'm just going to spend a little time. We're going to look at both sides for a little bit. So here's the Scrum Master cycle, right? It's a cycle by which teams of teams work together. And I saw one question related to this. Is that within Scrum at Scale, here's a Scrum of Scrums. Now, interestingly enough, when I first learned, a lot of us learned Scrum of Scrums is it's just a meeting, right, of a bunch of Scrum teams, and it has a particular purpose. A Scrum team is a group of people that have to deliver something of value together every 2 weeks. A Scrum of Scrums is a group of teams that have to deliver something together every 2 weeks or however long your iteration is. It's a team of teams. It's not a meeting. There is something in the Scrum Scale framework called a Scale Daily Scrum that looks like a daily Scrum for the team, but this is really important. A Scrum of Scrums is a group of teams that are collectively have to deliver something together. And you'll see so here's a collection of 5 teams here, right? Every team has a Scrum Master, every team has a product owner, but they have one thing they have is a chief product owner that has to resolve conflicts among teams. We'll talk about the product owner in a bit, right? So whoops, I skipped ahead a little too fast. So this is a really important distinction. It's not a meeting. Just the same way on a Scrum team, the team is collectively responsible for to deliver something. Here are teams. And we don't make up a whole lot of rules around how those teams have to interact with each other. In fact, we're looking to eliminate the rules, outside rules for how teams have to interact with each other. We don't do a whole bunch of upfront planning. We don't do, if there are dependencies between teams, it's the teams themselves that work to resolve those dependencies. We don't have to do a lot of upfront planning because we allow the people and allow the teams to interact with each other to remove those. I've been in organizations. I can tell you, in an organization like when I was in Bangalore with that company that did broadcast software, you would have collections of groups with 6 to 10 teams in them, and we didn't inflict an organization on them. Right? It looks chaotic, but sometimes these teams, you'd have people in the room and 50 people in the room, and we would just say, figure out how you're going to do the next sprint. And you've had 50 people at the wall interacting and shifting around stories, doing drawings and things like that. We didn't make up a lot of rules and didn't inflict a lot of top-down facilitation on them. All right? All right. So somebody asked, I saw a question in the chat window caught my eye. If somebody doesn't join the daily Scrum, is that a big issue? Here's the thing. There's no set rule to that. Whether it's a daily Scrum or with one team or a Scrum of Scrums, you have to have the people there that can replan the team, replan the day. On a small team, it's hard to imagine how you're going to replan the day and what you're all going to work on together if the people aren't there. When you get into larger Scrum of Scrums, where you have larger things, then maybe you don't need all 50 people there at a scale of daily Scrum. But you have to have the people there that can solve the problems quickly to replan the day and replan the priorities. So there's a quick answer to that. There's no set solution on that, but the team has to work on and have to find the answer themselves. All right. Scrum of, then we can start extending this, and we'll see some later on a very huge picture of this, right? So for very complex problems, the Scrum of Scrum teams, here you see working on a big product. This could be a whole product. There are 10 teams working together. We don't want to have more than, same way you wouldn't want to have a Scrum team with 10 people on it. You don't want to have a Scrum of Scrums with that many people. So here's an example, 2 Scrum of Scrums. They may be delivering on different suites of a product, working together in a Scrum of Scrums, or a Scrum of Scrums, as we're calling it there. All right. Excuse me while I do this. So the thing that's important here is that when you're doing this, we had the question about how do you do it in a top-down organization? The thing you are attacking is what's called decision latency. For a team or a team of teams to be successful, they have to be able to make decisions quickly. If things you're doing requires a lot of top-down sign-offs, that's bureaucracy that gets in the way. You can't have layers of management. And so what you're aspiring to, you've heard a minimum viable product, what you're aspiring to in this part of the area, when it comes to operations like this, is a minimum viable bureaucracy. And often the organization that does this is called the executive action team within the Scrum Scale framework. So here's this picture on this thing that's a picture of an organization with 125 teams in it. But always in all big organizations typically have old systemic impediments. Last organization I was with in India, there was a Scrum Master who was working with about 15 teams, and they needed to order headsets because they were having trouble communicating with their customer back in Indiana in the United States. Well, there was a purchasing rule in that this is a big, huge IT services firm that says, well, anything that big has to go out for bids. And so they said, well, it's going to be 6 weeks until you get your headsets. It's only about a $200 expense to order those, do a bulk order of those. They said it's going to be 6 weeks. It was so much bureaucracy to get through that they had a strong executive action team, and it took a vice president of that organization to say, look, this is a multi-million-dollar contract, and we're talking about 6 weeks for a $200 expense. And his exact words were, I've been hearing about this impediment for a few days. I really don't want to be hearing about it anymore, because this is a multi-million-dollar project we're talking about. And so there's where a powerful executive action team, usually of C-suite leaders. And this is one thing, when you're starting out doing Scrum at Scale, you have to involve executives from the get-go, because Scrum at Scale naturally is going to expose major problems like that. So I'm going to show you some quick pictures, right? This is an organization that was practicing Scrum at Scale. These are 3 teams going together. This is their impediment board, right? You can see, look at the bottom, those are the number of impediments they've squashed. We call it eating the impediments in Scrum at Scale. So that's how rigorous they were. Things that they couldn't resolve were immediately promoted to the executive action team. And here's their board. This is this organization in Bangalore that did broadcast software I was talking about. Any of the 3,000 people in an organization could walk up and see what impediments that executive action team was clearing. If you were staring at this thing and turned around, you'd see the vice president of that organization who controlled the 3,000 person organization and what impediments he did. So there's an example how they were using Scrum at Scrum to really rigorously eat those impediments. All right, we're going to quickly look at the product owner cycle here. We got 20 minutes left. I want to make sure we leave at least 10 or 15 minutes for questions. So I'm going to quickly go through the product owner cycle here. But you see the same level of rigor. This is where a lot of organizations fail when they're doing Scrum at Scale, is they don't attach the same level of discipline and rigor to working the product owner side, to really understanding customers and working this. You see there's this same iterative process on the product owner side. As a group, you see a single team as a product owner, they produce stuff and every iteration they learn from it and improve the backlog. So you see how simple it is with a product owner. With a team of teams, every team has a product owner, but then you have to have priorities. Not all teams have the same priorities, and so you have a chief product owner who is actually determining a roadmap for a whole product and working on coordinating teams. When I worked as a product owner, this was for an exercise equipment company. I was the product owner for a middleware team that just did RESTful web services. We had product owners for customer service, manufacturing, the actual hardware design, marketing, sales, corporate IT. All those teams had their own priorities, and the vice president for product and marketing at that company was the chief product owner that had to resolve things behind it. And I was accountable to that chief product owner for making the right decisions. And then you have, in big organizations, there's a chief product owner. This insurance company I was doing for was actually an insurance holding company. They had 3 major businesses for health insurance, life insurance, and annuities. They needed a whole corporate vision. They're a publicly traded company. And so their chief product owner is making huge decisions on each one of those 3 value streams. Where are we going to get the best business value for our customers? Are we getting it from life, from health, or from annuities? And so they're setting those big, huge organizational priorities. Doing the same kind, removing the same kind of impediments that the executive action team, but they're removing impediments about what we're going to prioritize. All right. So interesting. So B10 said, if the Scrums are delivering one product and they're sharing the product backlog, how are stories are divided, taken by the product owner from different teams? And the answer is you ask that question of the people actually doing the work. Right? There is no set answer to that. I'm going to show you an example. That's a good segue that I'm going to jump to here. All right. So here's an example of the kind of B10 what we're talking about. Here's an organization that had 2,000 products, right? And they were very siloed. Every one of those 2,000 products, had some managers that took care of it and had no incentive to work together. They were focused on optimizing the revenue through their own product. And so that was really killing them in the market because they were doing the work. The people who had to do the work of distinguishing between those 2,000 products were the customers. And it was really hurting their sales because they were so difficult to work with because they had all these different products. And it was the customers that had to do work to figure out how they were all working together. And so we used Scrum Inc, worked with this company, right, and worked across the whole organization. There you see a group of them. And they said, well, if we're going to do this, we have to focus on where we get the most value from the customers. How do our customers want to look at it? They had to understand that product together, and they reduced, like I said, they started out with 200 products. They went from applying Scrum at scale, they went from 2,000 products, saying our customers can really understand us better if we went to 200 individual products and organize those into 20 product groups. There where our organization is going to start of our products is actually going to reflect what the way our customers want to look at them. And through simplifying that, using Scrum at scale to simplifying that. So how are stories divided? See the group of people there? They figured it out. Remember, I talked in the beginning, there is no prescription for this. There's no silver bullet. It requires people working together, using Scrum, that kind of Scrum to facilitation. They did the same kind of iterations to improve their product line and go from 2,000 products to those 20 product groups. Great. So here's, I want to show you, here's an example. This is kind of a supersized Scrum. I'm going to just show you the picture. Here's the thing with hundreds of teams in it. And this is, when I talk about there's no single solution, they figured out, here's how this, with an Eat and Meta Scrum, but they figured out they needed some teams just to support knowledge, development things like, development approaches, product research, things like that, and a team just to focus on infrastructure. When I'm talking, it's corporate infrastructure. How can we make quick decisions on finance, HR, things like that? And so this is how they arrive, just through that kind of practice. I want to, as we kind of get towards the end here, and then we'll have time for questions. So here's an example from Saab Aerospace that actually iterates regularly a fighter jet using Scrum. So on the operations side, you can see teams have their daily Scrum first bright and early at 7:30 a.m. in the morning. 15 minutes later, they have a daily Scrum of Scrums, then a daily Scrum of Scrums, then a scale of daily Scrum of Scrums, and then their executive action team. So you can see the difficult impediments immediately at the beginning of every day start bubbling up. Executives in this organization said, if there's something else in my job I want to do, I better have it done before 8:30 a.m. because the rest of my day is spent removing impediments. Fauzi, you just asked where the CEO, CTO role in Scrum Scale. They are often on the executive action team. I talked about this transportation component manufacturer. Every role you just listed off, the CEO, CTO, CMO, and CFO, were on the executive action team at that manufacturer. They had a scale daily Scrum every day, and they were dealing with big, juicy impediments on how they had to get the team. This ended up being a very bureaucratic organization. When a new CEO came on, he got that group together, and they started attacking those problems every day. Oops, we're going to skip that video. So they know. Here's the thing with a big business. Here's where we started off. Okay. Oops, excuse me for a second. Skipped ahead for a minute. All right. Yeah, even with among 2,000 people, they had working product at the end of every sprint. But look at number 2. There's their big business goal. Have you reduced production cost and time to market by 75%? And they could answer the question, yes. Okay. So here's the thing, Drew, you said, are you saying everyone had to join daily Scrum at 7:30 a.m.? They must be a bit concerned to get stuff ready for the CEO to look at. Don't think so hierarchically at this, right? This is even the CEO. This is part of a team of teams. You're not giving a big formal presentation to the CEO. We're bubbling up the most important things to work on. An organization figures out how to do this yourself. And this is why it's so important for an organization not to look for a prescription. Leave behind your conceptions of the past on this thing, right? They figured it, obviously, Saab, they were so successful at this, they reduced their production costs and time to market 75%. They didn't think a lot about how they figured out how to bubble up that information in about an hour and 15 minutes, right? So if you see this, be curious about this, but this is only going to work unless you start learning the muscle and figuring it out on yourself. There's no prescription for this. All righty. So, oops. So there's the simple thing. If you go to a Scrum at Scale 2-day course, you learn every one of those components. We go into great detail. The slides, I'll have the slides to Rachel right when we're done. There's the information on Scrum at Scale. That'll be in the slides. I just wanted to give a little pointer that our dear host our dear hosts today have a Scrum at Scale course being taught online coming up on June 11th, 13th. They'll give you more information on that. There's questions. I am very, like I said, I work as a coach and generally work at a coach on a global basis. God willing, I'll be in your country before long, once we can actually start traveling international again. It kind of breaks my heart that I'm stuck here in Michigan doing this, but I'm glad we were able to share this today. All right, so we've got time for questions. I don't feel like we have to rush. I will stay afterwards until we're all done. So if we want to start asking questions now, that's great.
What are the key difference between Scrum at Scale and less?
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about this, but the thing I want to reiterate is that Scrum at Scale retains, just like Scrum does, retains in a very intense customer focus. You can't do Scrum well without intense focus on the customer and the product owners, right? Less has a product owner group, but they don't, this is the thing, it's a very software focused approach. They'll freely admit that it's a thing to focus on. It's focused on technology and software teams. Scrum at Scale is for the whole organization, right? The whole organization to improve how they're delivering value to customers. That is the key difference. It includes the and you see half of the Scrum at Scale framework has to do with product ownership. There's involvement of the executives at the very beginning of the process. If you're starting out Scrum at Scale without an executive action team with real executives on it, you're doing it wrong, right? So this is the whole organization focus and the intense focus on product owners and customers. That's a key distinction.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Jeff. Okay. So the next question, I think Elaine is actually asking, could you please explain why estimation should not be normalized between teams in Scaled Scrum?
Yeah. So yeah, we don't, this is distinguished because we don't normalize, because velocity is really a team metric, right? The thing is, remember I talked in the beginning, you have to do this and master this at the team level. If you don't, you can't scale a broken system. And if teams themselves can't organize to estimate, so they feel on their own thing, remember, what's the purpose of an estimate? The purpose of an estimate is for a team to figure out how much they can do in 2 weeks. The focus is on the team, right? And only then can we actually start trying to have groups of teams estimate together. There are techniques to do this, but the thing is, the techniques to estimate across teams won't work unless teams can feel like they can reliably estimate how much they can do in 2 weeks. Remember, great Scrum teams often don't estimate, right? A lot of great Scrum teams, when they start off, yes, they're using point sizes and they're estimating. If they've been together for 6 months or so, they're so good at it, they can point at a backlog and say, there's 2 weeks there. They don't even bother with estimating.
Oh.
And great organizations can do that together too. They don't think you have to fall into, estimation is just there for the teams, and it's just there for a team of teams to help get information together. It's not to come up with all this predictive stuff. All right.
Yep. Okay, great answer. Okay, so another question from Debashish. I think she's asking, how does one go about setting up the team of teams in a large organization? Do we organize the teams along with that?
So I'll give you the most radical example I know. There is no set way to do this, right? But one of the things I saw at best was I was coaching in a big financial company, and there were probably 125 developers in this whole organization and 2 senior managers. And the 2 senior managers were actually pretty good at Scrum. They knew how to do it well. And so they got all 125 people together and they said, all right, form yourself into teams. Make sure you have all the skills covered on your team. So you can't just form teams with your friends. You have to make sure you have all the technical skills, all the quality skills, all the analytical skills you need on the team. But form yourself into teams of, you know, five to 7 people.
Mhm.
Go. Right, and 125 people there form themselves into teams, and of people that had all the skills. They did note they did have those rules, simple rules set by them by their directors, but they formed themselves into teams. So if you say how to go about it, where I've seen it not work so well is you have a group of managers who try to pick exactly the right people and exactly the right teams, right? People have a natural ability, and I'm going to say this is something that it actually is done much better in Asia than it is in the West, right? We always try to optimize and have the perfect people together.
Yeah.
The people who can figure out how to have the best teams together are actually the people that are on the teams.
Yeah, true. Good to know about that. And I think that's a follow-up question that's somehow relating to these questions, because just now you were talking about how Asian managers tend to like pick and choose the teams to optimize the results. So I think Fauzi is
you know, I'm
asking.
going to let me interrupt thing. You know, here's in my experience. Now, I haven't practiced anywhere in Asia. We say, well, we have Asian managers like to pick and choose. I maintain that they learn that system from Western management. All right.
Wow.
You know, that is not natural behavior. You know, I can't say it's all over Asia, particularly in India. That when they have impediments, that's because they've learned it from Western management.
I see. Got it. It somehow got translated over to Asia without us knowing that. So what would you recommend the first thing to do when standard organization actually wants to apply Scrum at scale and get the benefit, yet they are having like this top-down approach of bureaucracy?
Yes. The thing is to start with a smaller group of teams. Just start with a really focused project, maybe 3, 4, 5 teams working together. Mm-hmm. Right, but do the practices. Even with only, if you're starting with a program with only 5 teams, make sure the teams are able to do stuff with just Scrum before Scrum at scale. But start with, wow, even with 5 teams, have an executive action team, because I'll guarantee, even with 5 teams, it's going to bubble up the most difficult stuff. I talked about the ridiculous 6-week purchasing cycle, right? You know, the slow hiring cycles. At that transportation component manufacturer, there were some ridiculous corporate IT rules that prevented people from upgrading the software on their own machines in order to work. That actually it required intervention from the CFO of the company that oversaw technology that said, forget that rule. Right, people need to work. So this is the thing. You start off simple with a small number of teams, because I'll guarantee that the most difficult problems will start bubbling up, and that's why you need the executive team and the executive meta Scrum from the get-go.
I see. Now I see the importance of it. So okay, that's another thing from B team. So she's actually asking, as the team structures like grows so big, will the Scrum Master be fully attending meeting at other SOS levels? Should it be that way?
Remember, what interesting thing was, so you defaulted back and you made an assumption there, which isn't a good assumption, is that it's the Scrum Master that has to be attending all these other things. And that's not the case. In fact, that's where I've seen Scrum at scale have difficulty in an organization, is that they just default, well, the Scrum Masters have to be all doing this. You have the people at the Scrum of Scrums who are most able to address the problems that they're doing with, and that's not necessarily a Scrum Master. The exercise equipment company, I was there. They were all on a technical level, all the equipment interacted with each other using very simple RESTful web services. And so we had the Scrum of Scrums was really the issues we focus on is changing. This is going to get kind of technical, but we had to change what are called the WSDLs every once in a while. Add a field, take away a field, redefine something. The Scrum Masters, they had no input into that. It was the technical people. So the Scrum of Scrums that happened about once a week was really driven by the developers and not the Scrum Masters. right? So you have people, and look, again, an organization, you have the ability to figure this out yourself. What you don't do is default back to the old hierarchical way of thinking things. So we have to have a scrum master, just the same way we used to have to, that project managers used to have to coordinate that, and groups of project managers. Give that up, right? Just give that whole way of thinking up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So those people on the field should know what they're exactly doing, I guess.
Well, yeah, they already know it today better than anybody else.
Yeah, true. Okay, so from Yash, there's another question. He's actually asking, it's almost a comparison among frameworks as well. Is Nexus same as SOS, but with few teams only? Is it that way?
So Nexus is the framework I'm probably the least fluent on, right? But the one thing I can tell you about Nexus is still, again, very software focused. Yes, they have a Scrum of Scrums. The Scrum, as I understand Nexus, their Scrum of Scrums are focused on making sure people at particular roles are there in that group. Scrum Scale doesn't set up rules like that. We allow the Scrum of Scrums to figure out who really needs to be there. I talked to you here as example, the example I just gave, the Scrum of Scrums is really driven by architectural concerns. So it was really technical developers that led that. Some organizations like this insurance company had just thousands of archaic business rules. Well, the Scrum of Scrums and the interaction was really driven by analysts and architects. So a lot, there's other frameworks specify who's supposed to show up. Scrum Scale does not. It just, the same way it allows a team to self-organize, we allow a team of teams to self-organize.
I see. It somehow relates with the Scrum Guide, whereby Scrum actually mentioned that self-management is important. Is it that way?
That's right. And the same thing applies at Scrum Scale. Same thing applies, interesting enough. And the thing is that Scrum Scale, there are the simple structures with the Scrum of Scrums and the Meta Scrum allows, like in Saab, there were 2,000 people. Mm-hmm. When I was at this organization in Bangalore, 3,000 people using these simple practices, but there wasn't a lot of bureaucracy involved. In fact, it was when the bureaucracy tried to control the communication is when things slowed down.
Mm-hmm. I see. Good to know about that. Okay, so due to time constraint, I think let's take one last question, Jeff. So It's from Bertin. She's asking that if the SOS are delivering one product, thus they are sharing one product backlog, how are stories divided or taken by different product owners from different teams?
Yeah, I talked about this one before. In fact, let's choose another one because I already answered that one. Okay.
Yeah. So Elaine is actually asking, you mentioned that Scrum at Scale without CEO, CTO, CMO, CF was wrong. Do you have any advice on how can we convince them to join?
So here's the thing, remember what we talked about in the beginning. Simple business goals, but really challenging business goals. Cutting call center costs 40%, tripling the revenue of the company, right? Doubling our stock price. This is the language of business, right? And that's, if you're talking about wanting business agility, where you have to start. Mm-hmm. So yeah, a C-suite executives isn't really too concerned about process. Maybe they're not too concerned about individual engineering decisions, but they are very concerned about business goals. That's how they're evaluated. So how can you convince them to join? That means what you do is together you come up with a huge business goal, a huge measurable business goal. And that you all commit to deliver together to delivering it.
Show great results.
Yeah. Becoming more agile is not the objective, right? Business agility has to be a big business goal. That's how you get really good at it really fast, and knowing you're going to fail at some of it on the way. But that's how you learn and get better.
I see. Got it. Thank you so much for taking so much questions, Jeff. Okay,
Yeah,
so I believe Eden is here to close the session.
Like I said, I'm so grateful for people from so many parts of Asia to dial in on this. I want to come visit you all now.
Hopefully, when this COVID is over, everyone can visit everyone.
That's right. Well, like I said, before the pandemic, that was kind of how I led my life. I've generally traveled almost 100% for many, many years, and a lot of it in the last 5 or 6 years has been throughout Asia. And so I hope soon we get to a point where we can do that again.
Yeah, hopefully.
But in the meantime, thank you everybody for dialing in.
So by closing, I really want to summarize some of the key takeaway and point of highlight for all of you, so that you can be more aware of what Scrum Scale is. First of all, Scrum and Scrum Scale are Dr. Jeff Sutherland's knowledge. You'll notice that for all of these, the people like us, like me and Jeff, that's practicing Dr. Sutherland's knowledge, we always talk about business outcome. Why would a company do a transformation? Is it just to deliver any kind of value or anything? Being faster, being more agile? No, you want to do a transformation because you want to deliver better business outcome. And we always talk about more revenue, less cost, hybrid productivity, and things like this. This makes the Dr. Sutherland knowledge very unique. That is the truth in Scrum and Scrum Scale. A lot of people are using Scrum as a day-to-day work process. Well, I just come here and stand up to do a meeting. I'm agile, right? Without regarding what's the output, what's the business outcome, and things like that, right? That's not the point. Like what Jeff said, right? Being more agile is not the point. Having better business outcome is the point. More market share, more profit, things like that. So that's the number one distinction. Scrum Scale, Scrum always aim at this goal. Second, Scrum Scale is infinitely scalable with minimum overheads. We are using Scrum itself to scale Scrum. So all the teams, the EAT, the EMS, all the teams, they are Scrum team. You don't have to learn anything new. They are Scrum teams, right? So the cost of adoption is very, very low, right? Third, now there's a lot of people are asking about the path to implement Scrum at scale. Well, one of the, well, you can do it in many ways, but one of the template I would like to give you is that you start with a few pilot teams, 1 to 3 teams, do Scrum well, and thus establish something we call scalable reference model, those teams that do Scrum well. And then you copy them, you try to replicate them to become a multi-team system. And then you link them up, you solve the cross-team coordination issue, you link up with the EAT, and then you link up the business side, the EMS, and things like this, right? So this would be a default path that we can recommend to you. If you are interested in more of that, how to implement it, you probably need to go to a course for that, right? Okay. So lastly, it's very different from other framework in that it is meant for the entire organization. It's not meant only for software and IT. Dr. Sutherland has been a CTO and directors at organization. When he is looking at things, when he's drafting solution, he tries to look at the entire system in a holistic way. How can the organization work together so that we can deliver the maximum impact in the business outcome? So can IT alone do that? No. You have to involve the business, you have to involve the HR, marketing, everything. Hence, you can link up the entire company with Scrum at Scale, right? It's very result-oriented and business-focused. So having a strong PO organization is essential, which is different from less. Less is trying to make you have less PO. They are trying to use team members so that they encourage the team members to step up, so to take over some of the responsibility from the team, which is what Dr. Sutherland doesn't agree on. Scrum Scale is drafted late into the industry because Dr. Sutherland went around the industry. He looked at all the framework that's available to do Agile at scale, and he's looked at how we are implementing Scrum in our organization. he's asking, why is everybody not able to achieve the result they want to achieve? Why is nobody being able to do twice the work in half the time or delivering 400% productivity like this? What is the real hindrance in an organization, in your bureaucracy? And he's drafting a solution to solve those with Scrum Scale. It's not a new solution. He did that 1983 when he first joined a company from a medical school. So he's using solution from there. It's proven to work. He done that at bank, a very large scale implementation, turned around the business result in 6 months. So it's a proven solution. I myself, when I learn about a lot of other skill framework, I always have a feeling that this is not the right thing. It's a gut feeling. I don't know why. The moment I met Dr. Sutherland and I learned about Scrum Scale, I start to realize what is going wrong in the other framework, in that they are not solving the real problem. They're solving the problem at the wrong places. The real problem is, how do you create a minimum viable bureaucracy? How do you connect the entire company so that your decision latency goes down, so that you can solve your impediment faster, and things like that, that will propel your business result to go up. And that is Scrum Scale, an infinitely scalable framework with the minimum overhead, making use of the known components so that you have minimum adaptation costs. And you should always do Scrum well before you try to scale them. Otherwise, you're just scaling dysfunction. So that's the highlight of Scrum Scale. I hope I can do some. I hope I can give you some highlight and takeaway as well. This is the end of the session already. If you want to go to watch a replay and Jeff's slides and stuff like that, be sure to follow CI Agile LinkedIn account. Anything that we have, we will publish there. The video we will publish at the CI Agile YouTube account, but you get notification of LinkedIn, so just follow the LinkedIn. Again, I'm Ethan Su. I'm the regional partner of Scrum Inc. for the Asia Pacific region. I will find the next generation trainer, train them, coach them. So if you want to be a certified Scrum trainer by Scrum Inc., please come talk to me. If you are in Asia Pacific, you are my region. Now, there are 3 regional partners for Scrum Inc. If you are in Japan, Scrum Inc. Japan is what who you should talk to. If you are in Latin America, if you sing Despacito and you dance lambada, you go to find Fabian, because that's the Fabian region. For Asia Pacific is me. And if you want to become a trainer, come find me and I will help. I'll try to train you and coach you so that you can be the next generation trainer that can talk the real Scrum, the Scrum that Dr. Sutherland gave to us. Remember, Scrum is not a day-to-day process. You just do the work, stand up the meeting, and then you become agile, you become good already. It's not that. It's a decision-making framework. It's a delivery framework to help you to achieve your business goal. That is the true Scrum. And thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Rachel. Yep. Hopefully, I will see you guys again. Be sure to add me on LinkedIn. And if you are interested to become a trainer, stuff like that, right? I am very interested to talk about Scrum Scale with you. If you have any question, query, come and find me. I'm sure Jeff would love to help you with that as well. So please follow Jeff and ask Jeff as well. And I hope every one of you good luck. Right, enjoy yourself. That's a safe framework session tomorrow. So for people that's following us this summit, right, you are able to hear from the discipline, agile, Scrum Scale, and safe. Pick and choose whichever you want and whichever you think that makes the most sense to you. Our goal at CI Agile is to give you the best information to support you to make the decisions.
Yep.
It's back to you, Rachel.
Yep, I think that's pretty much of it. I think Ethan has summarized a lot of it. And I think if you guys really like how Jeff actually shared his insights about Scrum Scale and stuff like that, feel free to come back for another session on next Wednesday, whereby we are going to have the fireside chat, having 3 of the top leaderships from different disciplines to come together. So we are going to have Scrum Scale, we are going to have SAFe, And we are also going to have Discipline Agile by Flex. Yep. So see you guys soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Ethan.